Positive Lens Podcasts. I'm your host, Scott T. Each week, we will bring you positive law enforcement news stories from across the globe, shared by departments and citizens like yourself. In our Getting to Know Your Local Leo segment, we will speak with a member of the law enforcement community about everyday life and most things non-law enforcement, as we hope to adjust your focus so you see that members of your local law enforcement community are not much different than you and me. Please note, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organization or professional body. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or have concerns about your mental health, please seek the advice of a qualified mental health professional or call 988 immediately. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. Welcome to episode 18. In this episode's Getting to Know Your Local Leo segment, you will meet 8-year law enforcement veteran Sergeant Zachary Saenz. He is a patrol sergeant and peer supporter who has a mission to destigmatize mental health in law enforcement. We discussed his unplanned journey into criminal justice, favorite foods, country music, and the enjoyment of spending time with family. He also takes us through the situations and challenges he encountered that led him down a very dark path where he needed to ask for help before it was too late. You will not want to miss the unbelievable story of how he was able to use lessons learned from therapy to keep him from the worst. Please welcome to the podcast, peer support and patrol sergeant of the Edinburgh Police Department in Edinburgh, Texas, Sergeant Zachary Saenz.
Hey Scott, how you doing?
Doing well, Sergeant. Appreciate you joining the show today.
No, thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. I have to ask, before we get started, people outside of Texas, when they hear you work with Edinburgh, do they think you're in Scotland?
Well, funny story. It actually comes from one of our founding people of the city. They came from Edinburgh, Scotland.
Okay.
So that's why it's called Edinburgh.
Right. I did a little bit of history research on it, and I did see it with a name change a little over 100 years ago.
Yeah, it used to be called Chapin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, when I first saw Edinburgh, I had to double check myself. I'm like, all right, is Sergeant Saenz in Scotland or Texas? So,
Yeah.
So, getting started with it, just tell us, a little bit about yourself, because, we want people to realize that you're just like everybody else. You were born and raised somewhere. So tell us about yourself. You're born, raised, where did you grow up?
I was born in McAllen, Texas, raised here in Edinburgh. For about a majority of my life, for about 2 years, I lived in Pflugerville, Texas with my mom. My parents were separated, so I lived with my mom for a little bit, and then I came back down here, and I've been here ever since.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with Edinburgh, you are very close proximity to Mexico. What is that distance for you?
About 10 minutes.
And I think you're also a little bit west with the South Padre Island.
Yeah, we're just west of South Padre, so that's like another hour and 25 minutes from us.
So, do you make your way over there much?
Yeah, we do. My brother and my sister-in-law have a condo over there, and my aunts and uncles, so every time during the summer, on our days off, we're there.
That's awesome. I hear it's beautiful there. I've never been.
Yeah, you should really come visit. It's nice.
Yeah, I think the beaches I've been to in Texas are Galveston, so I don't think we want to compare those.
Yeah, no. Ours is better.
Sounds true. So let me tell you. So you primarily spent your life in Texas. You raised in Texas, but while you were in school, what are some of the activities or sports that you excelled in, participated in?
In middle school and high school, I played football. In middle school, I also played soccer. I played some baseball in high school. But mainly football until my senior year. I got injured and I didn't get to finish playing the season, so but it was good. Our team that year went all the way to the third round of the playoffs. So
oh, sweet.
Yeah.
And what position were you then?
I played a running back.
So you were a core part of the offense.
Yes, sir.
And then being in Texas, everyone Texas is God, country, family, and football.
Yep, exactly. Yep, all over. Every Friday or Saturday, high school football, college football, and then Sunday, we have the Dallas Cowboys.
I was just going to ask, you're a Cowboys fan?
Yep.
Yeah, well, you guys have had a tough 30 years, but yeah, I'm a New York Giants fan. It's a bit of a challenge for me. I mean, I've had our Super Bowls, but we're more of a laughing stock than anything these days.
You know, they're all right.
So, growing up in Texas, if you were to reflect back on childhood, what are some of your favorite memories that you had?
Growing up, during Christmas time, we would make tamales at my aunt's house with my grandma, and
Nice.
we also had what we called Fish Friday.
Okay.
So every Friday we would make fish at my house at my house or my aunt's house, and we'd go over every Friday, and that's what we would eat.
That's pretty
Spend
cool. And let
family
me
time
ask you,
together.
so is that a tradition that you keep today as well? Some of those traditions that you'll carry forward to your family eventually?
Yeah, so we now I haven't gone recently, but every Friday we they do a decompression Friday.
Tell
So
me more about
after
that. How's that work?
so I mean it's the wrong way to cope, and we'll talk about the right way to cope, but we usually get together as a family. We either my uncle will cook or we'll order food, and we'll have some drinks and just talk about our week, about what's going on, see if we plan any vacations. Pretty much that. Get enough alcohol in my sister-in-law and my fiance, and they're booking trips all over the world. So
Well, yeah, like I said, it might be one of the not best ways to cope, but the family time is you can't make that up, right? That's
no,
that's the
yeah,
phenomenal part of it.
yes, that's the best part of that of doing decompression Friday.
Awesome. So now you've been in law enforcement for 8 years, but tell us a little bit
Yes.
more. What led to you pursuing a career in law enforcement, and were there other careers that you were considering at that time?
So when I applied to be a cop, I was working at the sheriff's office as a quartermaster or assistant quartermaster, and I didn't want to be a cop. I was still in college, pursuing a degree in psychology. Eventually, my main goal was to be a. First, it was I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist, but then I thought, I don't think I could tell parents, that their kids are sick, and I was like, yeah, no, that's not for me. So then, when my dad came back from Iraq and stuff, I got into the whole psychology part of it. So I started going to school for psychology, and I wanted to be a psychiatrist. Well, I don't think I could do med school. So while I was working at the sheriff's office, the Ann Arbor Police Department was hiring at the time, and my lieutenant at the time was like, "Hey, you know what? Apply and see if you get in." And so it just happened. I didn't want to be a cop. It was never my dream to be a cop, but my dad was a military police officer, and he also was a bailiff at our county courts for child support court, and
Okay.
he was also a corrections officer with the state. So, and then during that time, my brother had just started with customs, so he's a customs agent right now. So it
Very
was
nice.
time to join the family business.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It wasn't necessarily the path, but you were surrounded by it growing up
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Hmm.
And, the part you mentioned about the oncology with children, in your role in law enforcement, you've had to deliver some challenging stories.
Yeah.
So you mentioned going to school for psychology. How has that helped you have those conversations with some of the parents?
Um, I mean, it's hard to talk about even with, you know, um, I've been to calls where people have passed, um, children have passed, and it's hard to tell these people, what's going on, right, and what
Yeah.
happened, and um, it affects them, but it also affects us as police officers. We sometimes we tend to think that we're just the badge and the gun, but we forget that we're human sometimes. So, it affects
Yeah.
us a lot.
Yeah, I know we're going to cover more about that probably going further with the episode, but that's absolutely true. No matter how much training you go through in preparation for it, the human element is irreplaceable, and
Yeah,
that's the fabric of who we are.
yeah,
thinking of some of the little more fun stuff at the moment, though. So I know you do fish fries on, well, not fish fries, but, decompression Fridays, you do fish.
Hmm.
Outside of the fish with the family, when you're not at work, I say when you're not at work because that could sometimes be fast food. When you're
Yeah.
outside of the work part, what is your favorite food? What do you like to get down and dirty and eat?
Uh, sushi, or if I'm cooking, just barbecue, steaks,
Barbecue.
fajitas, um, stuff like that. That's pretty much what my diet is outside of work.
So I'll start with the sushi because I like both choices you mentioned. What is your sushi dish?
My favorite sushi is the Godzilla roll.
Tell me about the Godzilla roll. I mean, I haven't heard of the Godzilla roll, honestly.
It's I actually don't even know what's in it. If you ask me like for the
So you're telling me
ingredients
you eat sushi, you don't
straight
even know what you're
out,
eating.
I know what it is. I just I don't remember all the ingredients inside of it, but I love eating sushi, and we actually have a all you can eat sushi place here,
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
yeah, so it's pretty good. But yeah, I mean sushi is my favorite thing, and with some fried rice, you know, can't forget the rice.
The tough part about sushi is there's so little fish in it, we'll call it, and so little vegetables mixed in with it, and it's wrapped in rice, and you eat so much of it, and then you sit down, and all of a sudden that rice starts to expand,
Yep.
and yeah, you feel it later.
You start getting full real quick. You start drinking the water, and then it just expands even faster.
Yeah, it's a bad combination.
Yeah.
On the barbecue, so is there a specialty?
Yeah, I love cooking fajitas on the grill. Sometimes I'll do ribs.
Okay,
I've only cooked one brisket in my life. It
they're hard
actually
to
came out
cook.
pretty good. It actually
Wow.
it
Kudos,
actually
kudos. Yeah,
came out pretty good. I mean, for my first time, it came out good. But yeah,
at least you thought it tasted good.
yeah,
Yeah, ribs are great, and there's that fine balance between having them fall off the bone, and if you just go a little bit too long, they're tough as
hmm
nails, and
yeah,
they lose. That's when you drown in barbecue sauce.
yeah. You just put as much until it's moist enough to eat.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I know you enjoy the food. So when you're hanging out with your friends, what is it you guys are doing for fun? What is it? Is it cooking? Is it socializing besides food? Like, what is that environment for you?
For when we hang out with friends, and usually if I'm hanging out with friends, it's with me and my fiance, and we're usually here at the house hanging out, barbecuing. Um, Lately, I haven't been drinking much, but they'll have some drinks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean that's pretty much when we hang out with friends. Every once in a while, we'll go out to a bar or a, a country bar and just sit, talk, sometimes dance. I'm not really good at dancing. My fiance is, but I'm not. So
Wait, you go to a country bar, you have to dance.
yeah, I attempt to dance.
All right.
I attempt. So
So, all right, so a country bar. Now, I guess you like country music. If we were to grab
yep.
your playlists, is that the top of the list, country?
Right now I've been listening to a lot of Christian music, but
Okay.
right after that is country. Yeah,
All right.
country for sure.
And you mentioned drinking in the bars. It seems like the more we drink, country music becomes more the top of the playlist.
Yep. Yeah, it starts going up there, and in our culture down here, it's once you drink enough, it gets into the Spanish music, Tejano and Norteño and stuff like that. So
My wife is Spanish. I can appreciate that as well. So when the party starts to change, the music does as well.
yep,
So
exactly.
you mentioned that you and your fiance though. Is she just a cook with you as well?
I do most of the cooking. Sometimes she'll do. I will tell you, she makes a mean Toscana soup.
Okay, that
So
works.
she's actually gonna make some tomorrow. So I'm gonna go grocery shopping right after this. So that way I can get the stuff. So that way she can make it. But she makes good soups. She tried chicken noodle soup. Tried making chicken noodle soup for the first time a couple weeks ago, and that was bomb. So, but she can cook. But
Well, that's classic. You got the ribs going, you got the meat going, and she's got the soup going. You're covering everything.
yep, she loves cooking, making the sides and stuff too. She'll make rice and beans and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah. My wife pretty much says every meal has to have rice and beans with it. And
yeah,
I'm Italian, so for me, every meal is pasta, and she's rice and beans. So we really load up on the carbs.
yeah.
So
That's a well carb diet there.
it is, yeah. If they told me to go to a zero carb diet, I think I'd have no food to eat. I'd be in trouble. All right, so you guys hang out. You go to the country bar, hang out. There you have your playlist. What's the last concert you went to? Not for work. I know with work sometimes you have to probably oversee concerts, but for fun.
Man, what was the last concert we went to? Last concert. I'll tell you one I remember. I don't remember if that was our last one. We went to a Luke Combs, Cody Johnson, Zach Bryan, and Morgan Wade concert in Denver
Wow,
back in 2021, I believe.
that's a killer concert.
Yeah, or 2022. Yeah, it was a good concert.
It sounds like a festival. It must have been more than a couple hours.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was about. We went to the pre-party the day before, and then we went to the concert the next day, and it was pretty good. And it was on May 22nd, which was we got to Denver because it was in Denver at Mile High,
Okay,
and it was snowing in
of
May,
course it would
and
in Denver.
I was like, what? It's snowing this late in the year, so
Yeah, you never know with Denver what you're gonna get there.
yeah,
It's unbelievable. Like I said, May and you have snow. Who would ever think that?
yep,
Um,
exactly.
all right, so changing gears a little bit, you're telling me a little bit of history already about where the name Edinburgh come from. So
Hmm.
if you had the opportunity to go back in human history and change something, an event that occurred or something, what would you like to change?
Man, that's hard because I'm not a big history buff, but um, I guess I would say just in general changing stigma around mental health, in our professions as police officers, first responders, military, and maybe if we would have started way back then, we could have saved a lot of lives, you know,
Yeah,
up to now.
uh, that's true. And if it's tough to really, I guess, to even determine where it started.
Hmm.
Just somewhere along the journey, it became a negative for someone to have a mental health challenge.
Yeah.
So, you. All right, so sticking with some fun stuff before we get to some of the mental health pieces for
Yeah.
you. So, if you could teleport, if we just said, all right, Sergeant Signs, right now, pick a spot, teleport anywhere on Earth, where would you go?
I really want to go to Greece. I want to go to
Greece.
Santorini, Greece. Yeah.
That would be phenomenal. Who would you bring with you, though?
My fiance, of course.
All right, so maybe that'd be the destination wedding.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our honeymoon.
Yeah, if you have a destination wedding in Santorini, you have a lot of pissed off family members.
Yeah. Yeah, because nobody would go because,
Exactly. Now,
yeah.
is there something about that spot that is captivating to you, or what actually drives
I
you
think
there?
it's just from pictures that I've seen, it just seems real peaceful and nice and calm, and the history around Greece in general. I would love to see all the historical markers and stuff.
Yeah, when you go back then to the old ages, it was really the Greek and Roman empires, right?
Mm,
There's so
yeah,
much there, and Greece has always been Greece, even with all the changeovers and wars. They've still really kept their culture,
yeah,
which is impressive, honestly. And they're home of the Olympics. They started.
yep, yep, exactly.
So that's pretty cool. All right, so new book coming out, dropping out, next week, all about your life. What's the title of the book and what's the focus?
Uh, well, you know me. Uh, it's more than likely about me, my life, and my mental health, and how I got out of it. And it'd be a good, happy story. At first it'd probably be a little rough, but then at the end, we overcome, and we we come out and we break out of that shell, and we become one with our mental health, and that's probably what my story would be.
So I guess the question is, when are you going to start writing it?
I I mean, I can tell you it's already in the works.
All right, that is great to hear.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your dad served in the military. You mentioned that you have experience with family who's in law enforcement. You mentioned different things. You mentioned your parents were separate growing up. A lot of things impact our lives. But if you were to go back and think about something that shaped you to be who you are today, what is that event for you? And then when did you even realize it? Because sometimes we don't realize we become somebody different until years
Hmm.
later, and then we go back and say, that was a turning point.
Yeah. I would say it would have to be my parents' divorce. Uh, you know, growing up and having to go from one house to another house to another house and not being able to see your parents together anymore. It kind of affected me growing up. But in the long run, I mean, I think I'm okay. I came out fine,
You
but no,
too.
I would say that was a big turning point. But luckily, I had a lot of family support from both sides. Well, of my family. So yeah, I mean it sucked, but at the same time it we were able to get through it. And I would say that was probably one of the biggest changes in my life.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. You said the family support,
Yeah,
because no child wants their parents not in the same house. But
yeah,
once it happens, it's a whole new development you have to work with. And
yeah,
when you have family support from both sides, they're keeping your family mended together for you. You're
yep,
hearing the stories about mom, you're hearing the stories about dad, and while they're not individually sharing them, you're keeping the positives of the family rather than one family member pitting the other against each other.
yeah,
Right? And unfortunately, with divorce, that usually happens. You always hear all the bad about one parent. So,
yeah,
but yeah, we learn from them for sure. You
yep,
know, beyond that, in law enforcement, a lot of things you experience in your career, and you have to try to balance with those things, right? You have to try to cope with the challenges.
yeah,
Oftentimes, within the job, because
hmm,
what you do in law enforcement and what you experience is different than most others.
yeah,
But for people to understand that law enforcement professionals have to balance not just what happens in the professional life, but also balance with the challenges in their personal life.
mhm.
Can you share with us a difficult personal situation that you experienced during your career, and how do you cope with it?
Yeah. So I started back in 2017, and uh, I can tell you my first deceased person that I went to was a suicide. Uh, it was a male that had shot himself in the head. And, they don't train you how to, you know, uh, look at the scene. You just go in and start processing stuff like that.
Right.
And so uh, after that, my field training officer at the time asked me like, hey, after the call, do you need a debriefing? Do you want to go back down? And because of the culture, I didn't want to seem weak, and I was like, nah, I'm good. Let's go. Right. 2 weeks later, I started having the nightmares, and the scene would play over and over and over again, and I really didn't think anything of it. In 2021, my grandma passed away from Alzheimer's, and that was hard, but you know, she was on hospice at my aunt's house, and so I go to my aunt's house to go see her before the funeral home gets there. And while I assist the funeral home put my grandma in the back of the funeral home van, and I noticed that I have no emotion. I'm not crying. I look at my dad, with his PTSD and stuff like that, the stuff that he deals with. I noticed that he's not crying, and at that point, I knew, part of my French, but that I was up.
Yeah.
It was I knew I needed the help, but at the same time, I was still scared to get the help because I didn't know what was going to happen to my career if I went to go get that help. And then in 2022, I was involved in a critical incident, and that was pretty much the cherry on top. And I started spiraling downward and started drinking heavily, suicidal thoughts. And it got to the point where I had drank heavily one night at a wedding, and while my fiance is driving us back home, I wanted to jump out of the car. Luckily, I had already started therapy, and even though I was inebriated, I could still grab onto some of the tools that I had learned from therapy. And the way I describe it is like I was literally fighting with myself in my head, like
Wow.
to stay alive or to jump out, you know. And it was difficult because my fiance is driving,
Right.
and she's seeing me like this, and she told me the next day, she's like, I could literally hear you fighting with yourself. Like some of you just sounded super dark, and part of you was like no, just hold on, like you're almost there, like. And yeah, I mean, it was that was a big uh, game changer in my career.
Yeah, those three completely unrelated events had such a tremendous impact. I'll go with just saying sorry for you lost your grandmother. I know how difficult that can be. I had mine down the street from me growing up, and to see her pass when hospice. I was at the house when it happened, but
Mm-hmm.
my experience was different than yours because they said you're training. I want to go back to that what you mentioned when you showed up that scene. They said you're not taught to have emotion. You're taught, like I
Yeah.
said, to process.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess when you've done that for a period of time, it starts to bleed into your personal life.
Yeah.
So like I said, with your grandmother, and it was just another body almost for you. It seems like.
Yeah.
And I commend you though because like I said you started therapy
Mm-hmm.
while going through it, and I can't imagine how your fiance felt. Like she said, sitting in the car seeing it, but
Yeah.
you're right there having an internal fight with yourself. But the thing
Mm-hmm.
was, either the alcohol and everything else, the fact that you can latch on to some of those tools is
Yeah.
commendable because you're at that point at a very, we'll call it dark time for you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still able to reach up to pull yourself out.
Yeah.
And and our minds, they're amazing, right? They're so powerful. They keep us
Mm-hmm.
alive every day, but yet they
Yep.
can destroy us.
Yep.
And I
That's very true.
almost, it's almost like a movie. Like our mind turns against us, and it's just unfathomable to think about.
Yeah.
That's you mentioned PTSD, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes people associate PTSD really with the military,
Yeah.
but the reality of it is, law enforcement officers, other first responders, but law enforcement officers in particular, in this case, they experience PTSD as well and other mental challenges. And you've been a strong advocate for removing it, to de-stigmatizing mental health,
Yeah.
especially in law enforcement. Can you expand on what you've seen from not just in your personal life, but what also you have
Mm-hmm.
been able to see as being a peer support with Edinburgh, and what allowed you to further really be advocates for others, and explain some of the challenges that those in law enforcement are facing because of fear of the stigma?
Yeah. So you said PTSD. I'm diagnosed with PTSD and major depressive disorder, and and just because I'm diagnosed with that or somebody's diagnosed with that, that doesn't mean that's what they are. It's part of their, their journey, right? It's part of their
Right.
story. But, a lot of these officers are scared to ask for help when, they experience these critical incidents or see these bodies, dead bodies, and, they accumulate over the years.
Right.
And some of these officers are suffering by themselves in silence. They think that other officers aren't going through what they're going through, and so they shut down and just keep it in, while it's destroying not just them internally, but also their families, their relationships, their finances, and stuff like that. So through peer support, one, I'm part of the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network, which in our state it's a statewide program, and what it does is anybody that has a TCOL license, a Texas Commission on Law Enforcement license, they can go onto the website, download the app, and it's all anonymous. Everybody has the same login, username, and password,
Right.
and they usually try to pair you if you need help. They pair you with somebody away from your region, from a different region, so that way you can keep that confidentiality. And I used that when I was going through my stuff, and it worked wonders for me because now I didn't have to talk to anybody here, and we didn't have a peer support team yet, and I was able to talk to two other officers in the state, which helped me. And now that we have peer support here with our department, you know, we're starting to see more officers come to us for help, or to, just to see what we're about, right? Like, there's still that stigma, like, oh, if I talk to you guys because something's wrong with me or
Right.
whatever, and we want to remove that stigma. And so by, peer support isn't just for officers that are in crisis, or officers that are going through a bad breakup, or officers that are going through financial problems. We want peer support to be known as, peer support. We're there for you when you get promoted. We're there for you when you retire. We're there for you on your birthday. We're there for you, you're in school, for your graduation, whatever, milestone that you hit. Peer support also wants to be there and support you through that. So we want to remove the stigma of not just the mental health aspect of peer support, but also peer support in general, because it has that negative connotation that, oh, peer support's only when you're going through bad stuff. It's like, no, we're there for you all the time.
Yeah, and that goes back to, in life in general, right? People can be there for the major events in your life, but you want people to be there for you some of the small events too, because the small events can turn into some of the biggest impactful ones. And like I said, they're there for you. Graduation day, the celebration, but they know, hey, we're here with you during good times and bad. I think it's great. I didn't know Texas actually had that as statewide. And, Edinburgh, I think you and I previously talked about it at the Department of, we'll call it about 200. So, if you're seeking for help and someone is concerned about stigma, it's a good chance everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can reach out to, I'm just going to say Dallas because it's, a large city. If you're talking to an officer in Dallas, no one knows who you are.
Yep.
So it allows you to have those open, honest conversations without any fear, which is a good starting point. Like, we want to get to the point where you can have that conversation in the office with somebody else and not have to deal with it. But I say deal with it, don't deal with the stigma, right? But the fact that you have that's outstanding network. Only recently we've started to hear about celebrities and athletes talk about mental health, right? Then, which I do believe is helping with the stigma, because young children put these athletes, for better or for worse, on a pedestal. They idolize them. So at younger ages, they're taking days off for mental health. They're taking a break from mental health. And I think that's a good thing. Officers are less inclined to talk about in the public forum, on a regular basis. And you mentioned about talking amongst yourselves. And, I think it's a great thing that officers do help each other, but oftentimes it appears that officers will try to talk to each other, because if I'm talking to you about it, the thought might be, well, Scott's never gone through this, so he can't understand it. And I know that's not necessarily the case of how people provide help, but can you tell us from your experience, what is it outside of that? I know officers don't want to bring it home to their families, right? So they're trying to insulate their family. But what is it that you feel that keeps officers hesitant to seek help from therapists?
One, it's that they would probably lose their job. There's that stigma that if you ask for help and you're a cop, we go through a psychological testing before we become officers. And I think that's part of that. Oh, okay, well, if I'm not mentally good, then I'm going to lose my job. There's protections by the ADA, the Equal Employment, EEOC. There's laws that are in place to protect us from that. Yes, you need to be mentally well. And if something is wrong with you, they can't just fire you. They have to go through the proper procedures. They have to give you the time to get better. But that for sure, that's probably the number one. Confidentiality is the second one. They're scared that if they tell a therapist that something's wrong with them, that the therapist might tell their department. So we all know HIPAA. There's HIPAA laws, and they cannot disclose anything unless you're suicidal at that point in time, or homicidal, or if there's any crime that has been committed.
Right, imminent danger to somebody or yourself, right?
Yeah, so they have a duty to report it. But other than that, I mean, they're not going to say anything. Anything that you say, like I said, my therapist knew that I had these suicidal thoughts, but when I told her, I wasn't suicidal at the time. So we just come up with a safety plan and go from there. So she didn't have to report it, because at that point in time I wasn't, But I would say that for sure, the confidentiality and the fear of losing job are probably the two biggest reasons why officers won't seek help.
Let me ask you, how much do you think feeds into the part that I mentioned that I've never walked a life in your shoes? So, as a therapist, I can't say I know how you feel, because I don't know how you feel.
Yeah.
And I'm not trained to know how you feel. But how did that factor in, do you think, with officers too?
Yeah, so that's one reason why I'm studying to be a social worker. Um, uh, Going through stuff with my dad, he would tell me like, "Hey, well, why am I going to go to counseling if these counselors say, oh, I understand, but they never went to war, they don't know what I did." Luckily, with my therapist, before anything, she told me straight up, like, "Hey, I don't know what you do for work. I mean, I know you're a cop, but I don't know what you do. I don't know how you do it. I'm not gonna tell you I know how to do it, but I know trauma and I can treat trauma, and that's what we're gonna do." So, for anybody that's a therapist that's trying to help cops, that's something that I would definitely try to say up front, so that way they don't feel like, hey, you know what, this person's saying they understand, but they don't know, they've never done what I've done, they've never seen the amount of bodies I've seen, they've never, had to fight for their life and stuff like that. So just telling them that you're there to help them and not understand what they went through, but to guide them to get healed, to a
Yeah.
right path for healing.
It's almost resetting the perspective of what the relationship is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did the big difference in how you phrase that, right? If I tell you I understand what you went through, I've just lost all credibility with you.
Yep.
But
Exactly.
by going with the idea that I understand trauma,
Hmm.
and it's made different types of trauma that I may have went through or I've helped people with, but there are certain ways to cope with trauma, and there's certain
Yeah.
techniques. And going back to, like, when you're the passenger in the car, you reached
Hmm.
out for something that you learned from therapy, and
Yeah.
it wasn't about being a police officer, it was a therapy solution.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so, law enforcement, the network in Texas is there, but um, what things else have you seen that law enforcement departments are doing around the country you think that will help overcome the mindset of the challenges with mental health and trying to destigmatize it? Are you seeing more progressiveness within local departments and around the country? What have you found?
I've seen around the country, through LinkedIn. There's a lot of departments that are starting wellness divisions, wellness programs, which isn't just the mental health aspect, but also the physical health, because we know that both physical and mental health contribute to one another. So if
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
physically healthy, I'm physically working out, I'm physically putting my body through controlled stress. When you deal with stressors, uh, being out in a stressful call, or when our resiliency, our mental resiliency is higher, we're able to cope with that faster because we're able to put our body through stress, controlled stress through exercising, right? Peer support, I've seen that there's a lot of peer support teams. There's a lot of regional peer support teams, because some departments may not have the manpower to, there's some departments where they only have like 3 officers
Yeah,
and they do everything.
and everyone knows everybody there. There's no hesitation, and there's not enough of a network within that department.
Hmm. Yeah, so they have. I know Galveston. The Galveston area has a regional team, and it's for all first responders, not just for police. And yeah, I've seen there's a lot more trainings coming out now for peer support. Teaks. We went to one called the Support That Saves. That one's a really good like introduction for peer support. For sure, the trainings that we've gone through with ICISF, the Critical Incident Stress Management,
Right.
assisting individuals in crisis and group crisis intervention, those two are great for responding to critical incidents. Officer involved shootings. Officers may have responded to an infant death. Officers may have responded to a suicide, and we're able to go do debriefings with them to mitigate those stress factors, and those symptoms that might come up later won't be as strong as they would have been if we didn't address it when we did. So a lot of the training for sure has been coming out. There's a lot of I've been looking up online. There's a lot of wellness conferences, seminars, and stuff that are starting to come out now. So I think
Yep.
that's a whole. Everybody's contributing to it, not just just the police officer aspect of it, but everybody's starting to realize that this is needed.
Yeah. And I tell you, and with that community too, you're seeing retired officers who are actually trying to branch in to help officers themselves because they went through a whole career and it was never talked about. Right? They suffered in silence, and now they don't want brothers and sisters in blue or other first responders experiencing that.
Yep.
And it's an amazing piece to it. And to go back to what you said, the peer network is just so crucial. I absent of a therapist, I don't know if there's a better person to go to when they have that support network because your family member talking to them is very challenging. And you don't want them to hear stories. You don't want them. You don't want to jade their view of the world, even though you know what's happening out there. And I have children. I can't imagine if I had to come home if I was an officer and come home and tell my wife about a story that's bothering me about a lost a child. But here I'm having to live it on the street, and you're looking at that child or the family member, thinking that could be mine.
Yeah.
And again, we're humans, and I don't know if we're truly wired to separate those two.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter how much training you go through, you can't simulate real reality when that happens, I don't think. Yeah,
through training, once you start going through the police academy, you start getting ingrained in this culture, like, oh, I have to be tough, I have to be, stoic, I have to be, when I respond to a call, I have to be this way, I can't show emotion. And yes, while we're there at the call, of course, I like to describe it as cops, we're really good at processing crime scenes, but we're never good at processing the emotions behind it. So, as we get ingrained into this culture, the longer we stay in without getting the help, we start becoming one with the badge. We end up becoming the badge. And, we forget who we were before the badge, which is, we're human, just like everybody else. All the people that we make contact with, we're human. And once we become the badge, that's when we start losing ourselves. We start losing our sense of reality. We're stuck in I'm a cop, and you'll go anywhere and people could point you out. You're a cop, the way you dress, the way, you try not to dress like a cop and you still look like a cop.
You still look like a cop.
Yeah. So, but, we're more than the badge. We have to realize that we're more than just the badge, and once we start realizing that we're more than the badge, we're going to be able to help people more. Once we realize that, hey, you know what, I have my mental health issues, or I have my financial issues, or I have, whatever issues I have, when I go out to go serve the community, I'm going to be able to put myself in their shoes, empathize with them instead of sympathize, and have a better outcome in that situation. And I've used my situation, my mental health with people that have called in saying that, hey, I'm in a crisis. And I've told them, look, I know how you feel. I know what it's like to be in that dark hole. I've been there. I've had those thoughts. And they look at me and they're like, and it gets them out of that for a little bit because they're like, wait, you're a cop. You're not supposed to feel that way. You can't feel that way. And once, you explain to them like, hey, well, I'm human just like you. And they start realizing like, oh, okay, well, if this guy has these issues and he's a cop, I could do whatever I can with my mental health disorder or with my mental illness or with whatever illness I may have, and it'll help the culture, the police culture, help the community better once we realize that, hey, you know what, we're just like everybody else. We're more than that badge.
Yeah, the badge doesn't define who you are. You define who you are. The badge is a part of it. Yep. Not the only piece, right? And I'm glad you put the plug in. That's what we want. People realize that law enforcement is just like everybody else. But it is true because we are all fabric of human beings. We all came here, whatever direction people want to go with how we got here, but we're all still made up of flesh, bones, blood, muscles, right? Tendon, ligaments. We can come out with all the science behind it, but we're all made of the same cloth. Yep. And we all have to battle trials, tribulations. We have to all battle those things. And so when you're talking to someone on the street, that connection breaks down the wall. And that's when you go from the protecting to the serving, right? Because
Yeah.
not everything you do is about apprehending a criminal.
Yeah.
And some people I've spoken to said they also find that they do more service sometimes than protecting.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know,
No.
for good.
Yeah. No. We have a lot of people that try to, they come in and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready," and it's like, yeah, it's not all about kicking down doors and chasing bad guys.
Yeah.
Most of our job is just community service. That's what it is.
But it's so vital because that
Yeah.
community service also helps reduce the criminal side of it.
Yep.
So for individuals who are in the law enforcement community and they're experiencing challenges and they're trying to figure out what they should do, what message would you have for them today?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to seek that help. We're so good at, calling for backup, code 2, code 3, and when we're in a physical battle, right? We're calling for that code 3. But when we're in that mental battle with ourselves, we're scared to call for that backup. We need to not be so scared and ask for that help. Call for that code 3 whenever you're battling your demons. It's just like in any other physical fight that you're in, but now it's in your head. Just call for that code 3, ask for that backup, so that way we can help each other and we can get better together instead of having to fight alone. There's this saying, nobody in this family fights alone. So whenever they need help, just seek it. However you need to seek it, with a peer, with a counselor, a therapist, anybody. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn if they need somebody to talk to. There's other officers, retired and active, that are on LinkedIn that would gladly, help out anybody that needs it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If somebody does want to reach out to you, they should just reach out to you on LinkedIn and just connect with you. And whether if it's for peer support or even to help you collaborate, as we're trying to talk today, right, and help de-stigmatize the mental health component of it. So, with that, and going back to the bridges, so moving away from the mental health piece, but doing the part of it where the community and law enforcement has to work together. What do you think are the ways that you guys can collaborate and build stronger bridges between law enforcement and community? What are some of the key components for you?
For sure, just going out and talking to the public, letting them know, like, hey, we're just like you. We have the same issues that you do at home. We have those at home. We help you. We help you with your issues, but then we can't even solve our own issues. Just coming together as a community to realize that we're all humans and that being a police officer is just a profession. It's just a way to put food on the table, just like anybody else going to work. And when we go back home, we go back to our families. We go back to our friends, our culture, outside of the police culture, right? And just coming together to understand that we're all human. It would really, I think, have everybody understand, like, police officers have bad days just like people have bad days. And sometimes we might have a person ask the police officer, hey, are you okay, instead of us going to them. And we need to normalize that. So yeah.
Like that. And birthday parties, anniversaries, holidays, you guys sacrifice a lot to miss them. But you don't want to. And I think when people start to take that shift and they start to realize that focus is like, we are sharing the same space with the same challenges. So, you'd mentioned early on that law enforcement wasn't the career of choice originally, but knowing what you come through to be to where you are today, if you had to do it all over again, do you still pursue a career in law enforcement?
I would do it just so that way I could help everybody out.
Is it nowhere the help because you discovered, I believe, it feels like a path and passion for you to help on the mental health side versus more just a law enforcement component? You could bridge them together?
Yes. Yeah.
So, for listeners out there, we always like for them to realize that, we were talking about the service, but safety is important. Protection is important. And we oftentimes put ourselves in situations that get us in trouble. So if you were to share for the listeners a safety tip that they should practice in the communities every day to keep themselves out of harm's way, what would you tell them?
be aware of your surroundings. If you're going shopping or in a big shopping area, make sure you lock your cars. Don't talk to anybody that you don't know that's coming up to you while you're walking to your car. If you feel like there's something off, walk back inside, call 911, and so that way you can, be safe, because in the world that we're in, we never know what's going to happen. So
Right.
just be aware of everything.
And it's unique because that is a common thread that law enforcement shares, is that being aware of your surroundings. Because if we just open our eyes, and we've all been victims, and stop looking down on our phone, the world is a very different place around us.
Yeah.
Your phone's not going to tell you who's walking up behind you.
Yeah. I mean, unless you see the reflection, but
that is true. That is true. Well, Sergeant Saenz, this has been a great conversation. I really, I'm amazed by your passion for assistance with mental health. I think it's phenomenal. You taking the time to be on here and be a guest, and we appreciate, like I said, not just your service to the citizens of Edinburgh, but it's really your commitment to your peers, your commitment to your citizens that way. And like I said, and you're keeping them safe, but you're also keeping them safe in a way they probably don't realize yet. You're helping them understand maybe who they are. And like I said, sharing personal experiences and getting them to realize that there is a similarity between what they're going through and that you may have went through, I think increases the safety, because that public awareness and that relatability develops. And then, the mission to destigmatize mental health, like I said, if you could change the course of one event in history, that event being removing the stigma of mental health, I can't imagine how different the world would be if people actually looked at it differently. And how many people experience mental struggles because they were stigmatized. I mean, it exacerbated the condition rather than helped the condition.
Yes.
So, yourself, you're a leader in the area. I think new leaders are out there and that feel the same way you do. But, you're on a cutting edge of it, and you're a change agent to help. And I think that individuals like yourself and the peer groups really can probably inspire command staffs around the country to start to see that same change. Will it take a generation change, or just take natural attrition? Maybe. But the conversations, if they're not happening, there's no changes. So the voices are getting louder. At one point, the path, I think, for seeking help with mental health was very narrow. But it's like a single lane road is slowly became a double lane road, right? And then a 4-lane road, and it feels like we're marching towards making highways so people can freely travel without stoplights, other than when they need for help. And so I appreciate all you're doing. I mean, the 8 years of service in Edinburgh has been phenomenal, I think, for the citizens. I think they're really, truly blessed to have someone who genuinely cares about them. Even the criminals, they are going through challenges as well. So your genuine care is important. And I just want to say, stay safe in your patrols. You're out there serving, protecting, and I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you joining us today and being part of the Your Positive Lens podcast.
Thank you, Scott.
I appreciate it, sir, and I hope we get to talk again sometime soon, and maybe get some updates on food and your future book.
Alrighty.
All right, thank you, sir. Scott. We'll talk again.
Sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mental health impacts all, not just law enforcement, as you heard about today, other first responders, or those in the military. It impacts all aspects of life, affecting how we think, feel, and act, and can lead to many difficulties in personal or professional relationships, our work, and overall well-being, which can potentially result in physical health problems as well. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or have concerns about your mental health, please seek the advice of a qualified mental health professional or call 988 immediately. If you liked this episode, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast. Provide us your feedback in the comments and leave us a rating or review. We truly appreciate your opinion. And then follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook to get all the latest updates. Remember, you can always find places that will share negative law enforcement news stories. But here at Your Positive Lens, you will only find your positive law enforcement news stories. Once again, I'm your host, Scott T. Thanks for listening, and we'll capture you on the next